governance. Now, the South African national broadcast has taken a lot of flack for financial management issues, for content on its programming, and now questions around governance there. But that's not just the peculiarity of what's happening in South Africa. These are some of the allegations or accusations leveled against national public broadcasters across Africa. Joining us now to talk about how to make them commercially viable and just more constitutionally inclined is Amina Frense, who's a project manager at the Southern African Broadcasting Association. Thank you very much for coming through. A bailout at the SABC of almost 1 billion rands. It's got the public talking because essentially that's taxpayers' money, and they're saying with that we need a little more accountability on the part of the SABC. Why have things degenerated to the point that we've seen them degenerate to in recent years?
Well, there are probably a number of reasons which you've probably followed in the media. You know, if you work at the public broadcaster, sometimes you're not the first to know. Or alternatively, you see what is happening, but it's very difficult for you to conduct your own investigation. Yes, there should be more accountability. Yes, there should be better governance. I think maybe it's been lacking in governance and management. I think adequate, efficient management. It is a public broadcaster, but it shouldn't be resources that should be wasted. I think there's been a couple of shady practices in terms of appointing perhaps the wrong people in the wrong positions, perhaps commissioning the wrong people to, you know, to develop content and things like that. So there's been, you know, and these are ongoing cases. None of these things have been proven beyond doubt. I think there are parallel cases going on concerning the management and governance of the institution.
Financial governance is the biggest issue here. In fact, some people have called it mismanagement because no less than 5 or 6 years ago, this organization had recorded a surplus. Fast forward, and we're dealing with severe debt issues of almost 800 million rands, staff not being paid, all those sorts of things. With a new board and a new executive, are steps being taken to address that?
I think the new board has been very busy putting out fires and also trying to make appointments in key positions. So I think there's a lot of baggage that I think they inherited, so it's something in between. And the moment there's interference, things go pear-shaped. There are good people on the board. I think there are competent people on the board. But it's a question of how they gel as a body to put the public broadcaster on a good course again.
Let's talk about financing models, because often people will compare public broadcasters in Africa with the BBC, where the government provides almost 90% of their funding but keeps at arm's length. In South Africa, the government provides about 10% of the funding, but you get a sense that there's too much interference. What other ways are there to fund a national public broadcaster?
Well, in South Africa, for example, the government funds about 3 to 4%, and I think the majority of the funding of the public broadcast is made up of commercial revenue. Now, I think everything needs to be redefined. You know, with the age of digitization, everything needs to be redefined. What is public broadcasting? Who is your public? Where is your public? I think that needs to be redefined. The public funding model that South Africa follows is, you know, taking revenue license fees, but even that has been turned topsy-turvy with people using their PCs or using their cell phones. So why would they pay television fees? But also, as far as the commercial funding is concerned, I think it's very, very difficult to get eyeballs and bums on seats, literally, you know, a guaranteed, you know, figure that advertisers work with. With PVR and these time-shifting devices, it's very, very difficult to know who's going to be watching what, at what time, and on which platform. So I think public needs to be redefined, devices need to be redefined, income revenue needs to be redefined. But if we're talking about public interest broadcasting, I think governments should use it perhaps as a tool for democracy. Also with digitization, I think you can have niche markets and you can have dedicated channels as well, and I think that should be used and utilized, you know, in the interest of the public.
In the competitive space, I mean, as you're saying, we're moving into digital electronic media and other ways of accessing mass communications, the DSTVs and the like. But when you look at these other alternatives, they probably have, the satellite channels have a subscriber base of about 2 million that we know of, whereas a national public broadcaster within South Africa still is a very dominant force. The question is how to continue to make it viable in the midst of this competition, because essentially they do have the viewership. They do at almost...
Yes, it's a question of remaining relevant and remaining credible and really delivering quality programming. I think also with low LSMs, living standard measures, you would see that some of those people also opting for quality information. So it's very careful. You know, if you're competing for the hearts and minds of people,
Right.
you really need to remain credible and relevant and come with quality programming. And it is a challenge. It's a challenge, and I think with digitization, with more channels, you know, the choice is so much broader, it is so much wider, and I think one needs to remain, to strive for quality content, if you like.
Vickers, just your perspective on this one, quality issues aside, funding models again, private equity is hot money that's looking to come into Africa, and there is an argument that the media space could be one area in which they could come through. Many of them look to free-to-air channels, those on the satellite channels. Is there a place for them in a public broadcaster?
I think there is place for a public broadcaster in a place like South Africa, especially because you've got a lot of poor people. Poor people tend not to have access through commercial channels, because the commercial channels will actually focus on the higher LSM. So serving the lower LSMs through the public broadcaster is actually a very important function, and also giving good quality access to news, for instance, becomes very important. But you can only do that if there's credibility in terms of the governance, in terms of the political situation of the public broadcaster, that it's not being misused by the government of the day. So I believe that it's very important to have a public broadcaster, but it needs to be governed very tightly, and we haven't seen that.
All right, governance, going back to your earlier points, what we've seen in this particular instance is a new board trying to gel, as you said earlier on, but a new board that's not gelling with the new CEO, and talks of potentially suspending him and the like. What needs to be done to fix this kind of thing? Because for all of them, I think they're quite new to the fray.
I think openness and transparency. As you might have realized, the portfolio committee, tried to hold a meeting behind closed doors, and there was an interdict, by the South African National Editors Forum, of which I'm a member, as well, to stop that from happening.
Yeah.
So I think in democratic terms, the media is important, democracy important, public broadcasting is important. I think openness, transparency, and accountability remains important.